Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Welcome to the mess we're in. Another week of insanity. It's not a week. Every day. Every day is insane.
It is. It really is.
It's like
insane is the word.
I always think I can't look at I can't look at the internet before I go to bed because I just think I can't see anything that will make me so angry I can't sleep.
Yeah.
So I have to leave it for a couple of hours, and then the next morning you wake up to Joan being fired from Joan Smith being fired from Cannes, whatever it was. What was it?
Administration.
Extraordinary.
That was extraordinary. Yes.
Yeah. But listen, before we talk about that, can I just say a quick thing? I was actually going to hop on before you guys arrived and use the chance to talk about something non-GC. I just wanted to say, I'm sure they won't be watching this, but I just wanted to say to Sean Locke's family how sorry I was to hear about what happened. It's one of those deaths that really knocked me for six. I did not know. I had no idea he was sick. I met him a few times, and he was always very, very funny, and very funny in how he didn't like unfunny people. He was always complaining about people because he was just saying, he's not funny, who were on the show, and he would never kind of fake the laugh, as Harry Hill's beautiful portrait in The Guardian put it. So I just wanted to say I'm really sorry for your loss, and he was just a one in a million comedian, So anyway, let's move on. So Joan Smith, it's kind of it kind of comes at a terrible time, really, with the Taliban doing what they're doing.
It is quite astonishing, and I think I don't understand how they think that this in any way is not going to make people think this is so bad. I mean, I'm very glad that it's been covered by the Times. It was the Times, wasn't it? That it was in. So I'm very glad it was in there, because people need to see that this is happening. I'm very happy that it's not another one of these things where we're all making a huge fuss and nobody picks it up. So this was in the Times today, as it needs to be, because it is. And then the excuses is, it's restructuring, which is always the same. But as somebody pointed out, could we, this is so serious really for women that it would be good if we could see the paper trail, the emails that talk about the restructuring, so that we can see that this is in fact true.
Yeah. I mean, the letter to you see these things play out on Twitter, and it's such a weird platform, Twitter, because the deputy mayor said that it wasn't true that she was fired for her gender critical views, and then Joan herself replied and said, then why didn't you respond to two letters that me and Karen Ngala Smith sent, about the worries that we had, and I could be wrong, but I think that was just ignored. So Twitter, again, it allows people to just speak past each other and not actually address things, I wonder if that's because Twitter is because the character limit on Twitter is so short that people are worried about getting into conversations, because they have that thing that emails sometimes have, where tone doesn't come across, and people are unwilling to engage with each other on the platform because it's such a fucking toxic platform, Anyway, sorry, that's kind of more of a philosophical question than a tech question. But why are they allowed to just ignore when someone like Joan says, well, I sent you two letters? Why are they allowed to just pretend it doesn't exist? We can all see the tweet.
We can all see.
I tell if it's a political issue that they're just too afraid to deal with properly, and it's astonishing how bumbling politicians are when it comes to this issue. They get afraid, they don't know what strategy to take, and they just seem to be making all the wrong moves every time. All of this is going to come back and bite them in the ass, everything they've done so far.
Yeah. Well, again, it's another example. Sorry, Helen, I won't be a second, but it's another example of people not being able to do their jobs because they're holding to an irrational position. If you hold on to an irrational position, like that, some men are actually women, literally women, even if they're fully intact, then everything, you just no longer are able to govern effectively. You're no longer even able to think effectively. It's a mind-bending thing you have to do.
And I think there's something interesting I've seen. So I'm sure everyone has seen that Shaha Ali is running for Green Party leader. Now he has jumped on this because he can. He is immediately, he's retweeted the Joan Smith sacking, the newspaper article, and he's absolutely said explicitly, it's got to be possible in a democratic society to be able to put these questions of care in rape and domestic abuse refugees without fear of losing one's job. He's seized on this issue, and he can see that he is going to campaign on this. He's going to campaign on this because he's the only one willing to say it. He might not even care that much. It sounds as if he does, but it's a superb strategy on his part, I think, because
absolutely,
nobody else is willing to say it, and so he's got the whole platform. Every story that comes out now, he's going to be able to tweet it out and say, "This is terrible," and I am standing behind women. It's a bold strategy, and it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out and to see if it works for him. Will it sway other politicians? I think this is an incredibly interesting fight to watch.
Yes, I agree. And I was very happy to hear that the Green site actually went down soon after I posted about the asking people to join it. So my little Substack, despite not having the reach of my old Twitter account, it's also kind of good at. It's still, I can still get the word out every so often.
You certainly can.
I was delighted about that. But like he's. I mean, here's the thing, right? There's a brilliant. What's that brilliant line in the David Mamet play? Always tell the truth. It's easier to remember. If you are starting off from a place of irrationality where you're pretending that you know what non-binary means, no one does. You're pretending that you know what cis it means, no one does. You're pretending there's a stable definition of trans, there isn't. If you're pretending that you know all these things that are not actually true, then it means you can't be interviewed about them. You can't really talk about them with any degree of authority. Because you get then what happens is you get these moments like Lisa Nandy. I can't remember what her one was. It was something like not being able to say what a woman was. You get like people just kind of bamboozled by all the stuff they've heard. Well, some people are demi-binary, and some people are asexual, and everyone has to be included. And okay, yes, I'll try and I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll just keep saying trans women are women. And trans and non-binary people are valid, and hopefully people won't notice.
That valid always makes me laugh. It's like non-binary people are valid. they have absolutely no idea what to put at the end, so we just put a word that really
they're quoting.
At all.
Yeah, I know, and where valid comes from is from like online message boards where. These kids are looking to each other and saying, well, I'm a bit like this and I'm a bit like that, and I'm a bit worried. Am I trans or am I not? Or am I gay or blah? People are saying, no, you're a non-trans binary in-betweener, and that's valid. And so valid is a word that again they're using, and they don't have any understanding of it. They don't know really what it means. They don't know where it derives.
That's the point of it, isn't it? It doesn't have to mean anything. You don't really have to defend that. You can just say, well, everyone's valid. It's all valid. It's all good. It's all valid. That's all.
It doesn't make any sense. I mean, at first they want to say, well, I want my feelings to be validated. I want someone to acknowledge that I have these feelings and I'm justified in having them. But then it just became, you are valid, because these were children and they didn't really understand. And then they just started throwing the word valid around at everyone.
Yeah.
So dumb. Like you're talking about like a parking pass or something. You're valid. Here you go. You can stamp.
Yeah.
I like that. Going back to what you were saying, Graham, about so it is true. It's very, very difficult if you do have this position. It is very difficult to have a debate. And this is obviously then where we see the idea of no debate. We're not going to debate. I won't say anything, and the silencing. But I've noticed something else, and we touched on it, I think, last week or in the extra mess, because a friend of mine had pointed it out to me that not only is one side, overwhelmingly sort of violent threats against the other side, which really there are no violent threats. You've also got a deliberate level of trolling, unpleasantness, mocking. It's deliberate.
Yes.
Like you've got women sort of fighting for a very coherent position. It's a very coherent position, and because of that, it's a reasonable fight. It's reasonable to be able to make the point. We can make the points very, very easily. There's evidence. We can talk about it. It's informed by feminist theory. It's very straightforward. But the other side, it's such a difficult thing to argue against because it is rational and logical. Then you have to either silence or, and I'm seeing it increasingly, deliberately try and wind people up in order to derail the conversation.
Yes.
I've seen quite a lot of, like somebody yesterday said, "You people" to me. I said, "What do you mean by you people?" And he replied, "Graham's Angels," or whatever you call it. And it was, it's just a deliberate way of saying, you women, you've just been led by a man. And, we're seeing a lot more, the GC movement is men, it's all men, it's men leading women. These women, they don't really know what they're doing. They've been informed by bad actors. And it is a deliberate way of trying to make people angry in order so that the conversation stops.
I'll give you another example. I'll move past the wonderful image of me instructing a group of women via answering machine. But what was it? It was, I can't remember what it was. But I saw another brilliant example of this the other day, and it was so crap, but he still retweeted it himself. The man at bus stop, the portly Scottish actor, someone said, "Define transphobia," because he was accusing someone of it, as always. And he said, define.
No, he did not.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So that's what they have. That's what they have. All they have is like they try and, as you say, Helen, they try and just put you in a little maze that has no exit. You know what I mean? And it's fine. They can do that as much as they want, but they're all running out of road. I mean, I can't wait to talk to Jane Clare Jones today about Owen Jones, who's the most perfect example of someone who's running out of road.
Very much so. But this week, I think transactivism has shown itself. It's shown a very ugly side. I think even more than I thought was possible. We've got the Taliban in Afghanistan, and it's an absolutely horrendous situation for everyone there, and especially women and girls. It's just it's so upsetting to think about, and it's so obvious that this is based on the fact that they're women and girls. There's just no question. It's because they're women and girls, and this fact is so difficult for transactivism to deal with that they're having to try and
contort themselves.
Yes, and to paint women as siding with the Taliban. I mean, I've actually seen it, and I think it's so crass and unpleasant. Such a crass, unpleasant thing to say is that women are siding with the Taliban. What an appalling thing to say. And I had to look this up for myself because I saw it earlier, and I thought I wouldn't believe that this was true unless I'd seen it with my own eyes, because it looked doctored to me. That the chap, the
failed comedian
chap, has tweeted out. I will tweet out a screenshot of it, and I don't know how better to illustrate it. And it's 3 hands, and it's saying, and the middle is enjoying Magdalene Byrne's videos, and it's got TERFs, KKK, and the Taliban around it, and it's incredible. And this is a person who sort of has painted himself as a huge trans activist. He's there. He's the voice, this straight man. He's the voice of trans women everywhere. And what he has done here is that he's brought himself into disrepute, but he's brought the whole of trans activism into disrepute. It's an absolutely disgusting, despicable thing to say. It's horrible. I just cannot say anything more than, but it's horrible. I can say lots more. It's horrible. but he's made not only himself look bad, but the whole thing, just like trans activism itself. And he's not helpful. He is not helpful for trans women here. He is not helpful for the idea that trans women should have these spaces, also carve spaces for themselves, a life for themselves out. He's not helping at all. This is, it's just made the whole thing look appalling.
Yeah, and also, where on earth did he get it? The Taliban are looking at Magdalene Burns videos?
What? Like
what?
What?
I mean, that's a great example of what I mean by running out of road. You know?
Yeah, at this point they're just deranged.
They're just deranged. It's pure desperation. And you know, he knows. I mean, he is one of the unfortunate ones in a way, because there are some people who have been very canny and have been going rah rah, but actually not putting their reputations on the line on this issue. The failed comedian is not one of them. The failed comedian is someone who has invested everything, his whole life in this. I mean, I have too. I've invested my whole life in this, but the difference is I'm right. I'm right, and he's terribly, terribly wrong. He's so wrong that he has just made an absolute fool of himself and the movement that he represents, you know, with this thing. The KKK are watching Magdalene Burns videos. The Taliban are watching Magdalene Burns videos. No, you know what? There's only one accurate thing in that, and it's TERFs. Yeah, TERFs are watching Magdalene Burns videos because she stood up for lesbians at a time when people like the failed comedian were saying that some fully intact men were actually lesbians. He is closer to the Taliban. He's closer to the KKK. It's a completely bigoted, dumb, anti-feminist, stupid thing to say, and I hope he's just nailed himself into his own coffin, you know, because
anyway, I feel it's despicable. It's just despicable.
Yeah. But listen, let's not dwell too long on him. There's other things to be discussed. What else has been happening that was funny? There was some. Oh yeah, no. Someone actually asked me to ask you a question, Artie. Someone said earlier on something about CBC. Do you know what this is?
I think just in general that the CBC doesn't cover the trans issue. Yeah, that's something I don't really have anything to say right now about it, but it's not good. The media in Canada is terrible. It won't cover this issue. Yeah. I
was thinking about that yesterday as I was sitting down with some friends who I dearly love, and we were talking about it, and it just hasn't broken. It still hasn't broken through the enormity of this. What's going on to them? They're still like. They even said, and this really was like, oh God. They even said, well, Laurel Hubbard didn't win, you know, as if that fucking mattered, you know, and it's like I don't know, it's hard to get across to people how big this is. For me, this is like a huge historical moment. You know, you have men, white men who have had no transition whatsoever, and they are claiming to be more vulnerable and abused than women, you know? And as I said early on in this, you know, what a coincidence that just as women and black people are beginning to rise up the ladder a little bit and there's beginning to be a bit of equality, suddenly white men decide they're the most put upon people on earth, you know? Yeah. I don't know. It's like it's an ideological coup, is the way I see it. An ideological coup that's taken place simply because the media and most of our institutions have allowed it to take place, and they've allowed these people who are kind of repeating these platitudes and these thought terminating cliches to just order them around. You know. Mm-hmm. It's like the publishing houses. When people come in and cry because Jordan Peterson is being published, you don't do what they say. You fire them. Yeah. You hire people who want to work with books and want to work with ideas.
Give them a handkerchief and send them back to their desk.
Exactly. You know, you put them in charge of the least important social media thing you have, like Instagram. You know, you don't fucking give them the keys to the Twitter account and have them make public policy. You know, it's. I
do think Twitter has shocked or surprised. I think people really have not got used to Twitter yet. It came along too quickly, and companies have screwed themselves over with Twitter so much because they don't know how to handle it.
Well, my favorite thing, it's hilarious. And my favorite thing about Twitter at the moment is that Meghan Murphy was banned, but the Taliban weren't. That's just perfect. Absolutely perfect. Listen, Jane's here a bit early. Shall we bring her in?
Sure, yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Oh, I should have planned that. We should have said no. That would have been really funny. That would have been really funny if we'd all just said no, don't, and we lived later. Hi, Jane. How are you?
Fuck off, Jane.
Hi, Jane.
Hello.
Lovely to see you.
Hello.
Let's be traditional and get the women on top. How are you doing, Jane? It's been
good. I'm good.
Good.
Yeah.
Oh, Radical Notion. You have a new Radical Notion there, don't you?
Yes, I don't have it with me. Oh, where is it? Where is it?
Oh, Helen's got it. Helen's got it. You're fine.
She beat me to it. Yeah.
Lovely, excellent. And who's in it this week? Month? Year?
Oh, we have. It's quite exciting.
Quarterly.
We have book reviews of Kathleen and Helen's books. There's an interview with Helen that I did. There's an interview with Suzanne Moore. There's a great piece by Judith Sweeser. There's a review of a feminist reading of J.K. Rowling's Troubled Blood. There's lots of pictures of people swimming.
Oh, lovely.
It's
That reminds me, actually.
It's swimming themed. Oh, and this collage that we did that people seem to really like.
Oh, delightful. Ah.
Oh, lovely.
Isn't it pretty?
It is. So you can have that in your home, and we will share the link so you're able to order it if you don't know already.
Thank you for the plug.
So listen, let's talk about what happened with Owen Jones earlier on. I hope that's okay, because
yes.
we I don't know whether you saw the start of the show there, but we're just talking about how a lot of these people, like let's use their nicknames so we don't get in trouble. The failed comedian, the Scottish actor Owen Jones. I can use his name.
I saw some crazy 3-armed thing from the.
Yeah, that was the failed comedian. And it just seems to me.
I was just like, you've just taken a random picture and written some random shit on it.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty sure that the Taliban have never heard of
Magdalene Burns.
And B, are not watching videos made by ranty, mouthy lesbians.
I don't know
what's giving me the impression that this would not be up their street.
Well, you know what we were talking about is how these people are all running out of road. You know, they put all their chips on something that has actually nothing underneath it. And now they're reduced to that.
It's getting to the way past the octupling down stage, really, isn't it?
The what stage?
Octupling.
What's that?
Double down.
Right.
Down. Octuple down. I don't know what would be after octuple down. I don't know if we have a word.
I see what you mean. Yeah, and it's getting thinner and thinner, isn't it? The substance is getting thinner and thinner and more transparent.
Well, the substance was always really thin.
Yeah.
What was that?
Shut! That's my bloody Siri. Shut up.
Siri's agreeing with Jane.
What does Siri have to add? I don't know if it is getting thinner, because it's always been really thin, because it's always been shut up, you Nazi bitches. That's what it's always been. It's never had any more substance than that. I do think they are. Maybe it's just that the wall between us is even bigger, so I do get a lot less woke bros and various TRA types turning up in my mentions trying to be they're intersex, but colonialism invented the gender. It feels like they're not even bothering to try and wheel that shit out anymore. They're just Nazi bigot, Nazi bigot, Nazi witch bigot. Someone turned up in my thread yesterday and said the most amazing thing that I just want to share with you, and just said, I'm not talking to them anymore. It's like trying to talk to a bunch of spiteful rocks.
Spiteful rocks?
Yeah, and then somehow
you know how rocks can be sometimes.
Rocks, you quite no, but I mean that's what I quite liked about it, because the rock thing is right and the spiteful thing is right. I mean, it doesn't go together. But
yeah, exactly.
That's why it was kind of a bit absurdist genius.
Like Magdalene Burns and the
It's
Taliban.
like talking to a spiteful brick wall.
Yes. Exactly. These poor kids. I mean, you do kind of wonder how many of these are just kids. I mean, I have a friend who gets regular death threats. It's actually well, no, I won't say who it is, but I have a friend who has regular death threats, and I said, what, they're regular? I thought they only kind of burned up every now and again. And she goes, no. Oh, it's like wallpaper now to her. And I just say, are you reporting it to police? And she just goes, it's kids. It's just kids, And it's so true that some of the most violent stuff that we've had thrown at us over the last few years, it feels like kids. It feels like very young kids sometimes.
I think a lot of the noise abuse is on Twitter, is kids. I mean, a lot of the problems in universities, which are substantial, are, young people. So, I mean, I think we've talked about it before, but there's like a whole kind of interesting question about what is going on with that generation and why this particular discourse has kind of seized them in the way that it has. And then there's people who are not kids, like fucking Owen Jones, right?
Yes.
Who should, who has some... That's what I find, and not only him, but the academics and people like Sally Hines and Alison Phipps and people who actually have kind of public duties and should have some like sense of public responsibility.
Yeah, definitely.
Either to their students or to their readers or to like the representation of reality or something, right? Yeah. And the fact that someone like Owen Jones, he has his one narrative. They are evil. They are homophobes. They are privileged, powerful media elites. They are right-wing people. They are centrists. They are Nazis. They are bigots. They are, and everything has to be folded back into that narrative.
But with Owen Jones there's also, and this is something that is so obvious, but he can't say, but also they are women. It's all centered on the fact that we are women. It's completely misogynistic. But obviously, he can't say that we're women because that would show that he knows what a woman is.
Well, Helen, you found a brilliant thing, which was he's only ever used the phrase "look at the state of this with women." I thought that was very good.
That whole thing kicked off because after the Plymouth shooting, he was like, we're going to talk about incels on the show. Yeah. And I was like, oh, give me a fucking break.
Exactly.
Like, that was my response. I was like, no, Owen, you don't suddenly get to like turn up and like act like you give a fuck about systems of power that oppress women or that you're interested in male entitlement or any of these things because you are the living embodiment of it. So we are not having it. Yeah. And that was the point I was trying to make. And then obviously,
and you made it well and lucidly. It made complete sense.
But that's what he picked up, which then turned into this whole thing where he then linked it to this. And the email that he received, I mean, I remember that it was like a couple of years ago. Someone pretending to be Laura Pidcock, I think, who obviously wasn't Laura Pidcock. I have no idea who that is from. Like it wasn't demonstrably from anyone that he couldn't link it to us. No. But and like the thing that happened with Phoenix Andrews, which Maya covered, right, where it seems like her mum was the victim of a phishing kind of scam.
Oh
right. And then she goes on Twitter and it's like, oh my God, the TERFs have got my mum's email, and it's my mum's WhatsApp, and it's like. What are you talking about? It's like the time that they were like, the TERFs are putting razor blades under posters in the.
I still see that occasionally.
We're a bunch of middle-aged fucking feminist women. We are not putting razor blades under fucking posters. You are out of your mind.
Also that's projection. That's projection.
That's the point I was trying to make, right? The mechanism of male power is projection. Women are not actually individual human beings who can be seen in their own right as individual human beings. There's just like a whole bunch of either fantasies, like so a lot of what is going on, in certain projective aspects of trans identification is a certain set of kind of fetishistic fantasy images of women. But then there's also, you know, women as harpies, women as bitches, women as ball breakers, women as all of this shit. We're never allowed to just be an individual human being. Like, and then he turns around to me and he's like, oh, the TERFs are like jumping on the Plymouth thing. And, you know, mate, I'm a professional feminist. I've been doing this shit for like 20 fucking years. I wrote a fucking PhD on the structure of male entitlement long before I ran into trans activism, right?
Yeah.
And the point of it was not so I could then have some pretext so I could persecute a bunch of people, because actually my concern is the well-being of women, and that's what I do, right? And so it's not actually that weird that I would be interested in the actions of this man in Plymouth, because it's part of the entire structure in which you are also implicated, right?
Exactly. I mean, you know, just as a side note as well, Amnesty International tried it on as well by expressing sympathy for the women of Afghanistan. You know, suddenly they're able to use the word women, by the way. You know,
actually, I thought that was.
Oh my God, it was like that thing that Varoufakis said. What's his name? Hang in there, sisters.
Hang in there, sisters.
Oh,
That was awful. But actually, the amnesty thing, you know, they're saying women's rights are human rights. I'm okay.
No,
because you know, they've been trans rights and human rights for so long. Let's have a bit of women's rights and human rights, and it shows that they know, they can see it. They can see it. It's so obvious that they can see it, and they know.
But here's the thing, Helen. It's one rule for third world countries or second world countries or whatever. It's another rule for the UK and the West. Like the same thing happened with what was it? Unisex. Like it was, I think it was UNICEF said that separate toilet facilities are absolutely essential for, you know, third world countries, because they will help girls get an education. And they had all the stats that we always bring out, that how important they are. But over in the UK, they oppose them. And in America, they oppose them. They oppose these spaces. So it's the weirdest thing that they feel that they can dictate to women over here that they shouldn't have the thing that they're actually telling third world women are essential.
Well, it's quite interesting, because if you go back and, you know, I spent quite a lot of time like digging around in the archives trying to piece together how this thought system like took shape. And one of the things that's quite interesting is that in a number of the kind of earlier writings, early kind of trans activist ideologues will basically make the claim that you don't, you know, because the problem with like sex inequality has been solved in the West, then you don't need to record sex anymore, because you know that's not a thing. We've sorted that.
Right, yeah.
You're just like okay, right. Have you asked us whether we think it's sorted? I think you might find we think there's still some areas where we need a bit of work.
Yeah. And don't just canvass people hanging out in the Groucho Club. Ask women in shelters and ask feminists who've been studying it for 20 years.
Again, there's this kind of like not inverse, but kind of, you know, they're always lecturing us about like colonialism and whatnot. But there's actually something very racist about this idea of like, well, in other countries. I mean, this is why, I mean, I feel a little bit uncomfortable about using the situation in Afghanistan in relationship to this, because I just think the situation in Afghanistan is so horrifying. It needs to just stand on its own. And I mean, I understand the point, you know, the reason why that point is being made. I don't think the point is wrong. And obviously, like the TRA distortion of it is completely fucking insane. But also there's just, I think, you know, again, it's to do with like respecting. I just want to respect the experience of what the women in Afghanistan is going through in and for itself, right? And not kind of drag it into our particular thing. But there's also just something really fucking racist about being like, oh well, women are oppressed over there where the people are brown, but we're civilized and white and we don't have those problems anymore, right? I mean, that's a very often what you know, MRA type men, whatever, will come up and say to you, well, women in the West aren't oppressed. You know, over there where they're heathens, they oppress women, but we're all civilized and we don't. It's just like, yeah, right, mate.
Well, we see this all the time, don't we? There's, as you're saying, the organisations like Amnesty and people, they get it, they know it, but here they're prepared to forget it, and sort of suggest to women here that they're actually just bigots.
Yeah.
I mean,
we've got sex-based depression taped, Helen.
Yes.
Oh, stump.
Let me ask you a different question. How much of trans rights activism, and by trans rights activism, I don't mean people like Debbie Hayden or someone like that. I mean the really toxic stuff that we're all so used to, the harassment and the viciousness of it. How much of that does come from incel culture, do you think, Jane?
I don't think it comes from incel culture. I think there are probably, people were posting some links and stuff in relationship to that conversation that I was having with Owen. There seems to be relatively well documented crossover at this point, right? And there was also a bunch of stuff going on around in like kind of around 4chan, 8chan as well, like a few years ago, where they were just like, oh my God, we can all go and pretend to be women and like totally fuck with the feminists. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I feel like that has played out.
So there's that. I mean, I don't think, where trans activism comes from and what it exists as a political, along the way, lots of different constituencies that have various interests. Some of them commercial, some of them pharmacological, some of them to do with getting access, safeguarding issues, like all kinds of different constituencies have attached themselves to the trans rights project as it has developed, right? And they're very diverse, actually. You've got, gay men like Owen Jones who like there's a certain kind of identification going on with a certain type of narrative about having something core to yourself being repressed, and then kind of coming out story. I understand where that identification would come from. It's a false identification in a lot of ways because they're not analogous situations. So and I think there's definitely at this point a lot of overlapping or, some kind of overlapping between the MRA incel community and TRAs, because it's going to allow men who have a lot of like aggrieved entitlement, let's say, to express that. So there's going to be a lot of kind of crossover, and structurally they're very similar, right? Because they're both about thinking that you are entitled to something from women, and that your needs should be centered, and that if women refuse to get out of the way and center you, that they're doing something like heinous and they're evil toothy monsters, and you can behave in some kind of violent and incensed way and will be totally justified. Which is where the kind of thing I said to Owen that he got so upset about like, sadistic whatever who should be punished. He had not said that, but there is what I was saying is that's the logic of male entitlement, right? And when TRAs come along and think they have the right to threaten us with violence and besiege us and intimidate us and call us names and otherwise try and coerce us into complying with their demands, that's the same mechanism as the mechanism that causes incel type MRA violence against women.
The thing that puzzles me is I think this is abundantly clear. I don't think this is difficult to see at all. Maybe it's because I've seen it so much, but I don't think this is difficult to see. And I can't decide whether Owen Jones can see it and refuses to acknowledge it, or he simply can't see it. I'm leaning towards the former. I think.
Well, let me add another thing to that, Helen. He's over if he sees it.
Well, of course,
he's over. He can't see it.
Yeah,
yes.
which is why he is so angry and so determined to try and like almost in an over the top way laugh at it and suggest that this is ridiculous. But I did notice he didn't get that much engagement with it. You know, he's got 1 million followers. And the level of engagement he got on that was really quite low.
Yeah, the level of engagement on that thread was quite low. A couple of the people on it, like Nathan Osseroff, were like, you know, known kind of professional turf hunters. And it was actually quite awkward. It felt like there was quite a lot of people like shuffling around, just being like, okay. And I don't know. I mean, that's somewhat encouraging in the you know, 3 or 4 years ago, you know, when we first got into this with him, and we were like, still the period where he, you know, before he blocked us all, where we were kind of going up to him and trying to reason with him and be like, Owen, like, we're feminist women, there's an issue here, and it was just like block, and then we were just. I mean, that was before we just decided he was an unmitigated misogynist, right? It was only at the point.
Yes.
I mean, it's like that thing that happened, like, amazingly. What was it? A couple of weeks ago, where Douglas Murray. It was like, you know,
that was great.
For like
Yes.
4 years, we've been trying to talk to Owen and going and him blocking us, and then us going, Owen, you're a misogynist, and him blocking and him blocking and him blocking and him going, I'm not a misogynist, block, and then a penis person comes along and says, Owen, you're a misogynist, and suddenly Owen's like, I must refute this.
I must write
This is the most amazing performative like demonstration of the fact that you will not take anything a non-penis person says to you and will not grant us any fucking authority over our own fucking experience. And as soon as Douglas fucking Murray, I mean, like, at the point where Owen Jones is convincing Douglas Murray that male privilege is a thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, I noticed the same thing happened with with Owen that happens with Heather Pito. We wrote a piece about revealing kind of Heather Pito's kind of past and activities and the way he's lying about his age and the fact that he ran before as and lost in a kind of humiliating way. He's just telling all these lies about it, and his response was a massively long kind of gish gallop that had nothing. It was hard for us to. I actually said to the writer of the original piece, could you have a look at it and kind of see if you can rebut the things they're saying? And it was just impossible because it was just a load of nonsense. And the same thing with Owen Jones. Like halfway through, he's listing all the things Douglas Murray has said about Islamic people or Muslim people.
I know. I mean,
what's that got to do with it?
He starts off by going, "This is horrible. Douglas Murray is evil. He's like just smearing me." And in response, I am just gonna write this long list of smears.
I did notice that.
You're just kind of like, look, you know. I'm a left-wing socialist, radical feminist, right? Douglas Murray and me are not working in the same terrain, right? At all. But at least Douglas Murray fucking deals with the ideas, right? Yeah. And he's going to make an argument and he's going to say what he believes. And I'm at least going to be able to like rebut what he says, you know, when he talks shit about something. Whereas I'm writing this essay at the moment on like, I'm trying to unpick like the history of sex denial. And, you know, I'm trying to start from like, you know, contemporary examples of the discourse. And it's like you say, it's like gish gallop. It's just like a smoothie of like a bunch. Oh, something Fafafine, something sex is a spectrum, something intersex, something blah, something Foucault, something Judith Butler, something. Finally, it's a bad something, and you're just like, you haven't even made I can't even pass this well enough to establish what your fucking claims are in order to rebut them.
But again, this is purposeful, isn't it? This is purposeful. Just like the there's no debate or just using sort of vapid, words like valid just in order to, so that there is, you can't argue with it. The point is that you not to make an argument so that nobody can argue back, and then it just descends into you're right wing or
right. No, but that's it. To come back to the point, like that is, and this is, I mean, we're kind of at an interesting stage now. I don't really know, I don't really know how it's going to play out, because it feels like, at least within like the discursive space of what's happening in this country, is we've kind of argued them to a standstill, right? Like it's almost like they know that they can't that we have a much. I mean, there was a post going around the other day. Some guy going like, guys, I've been thinking. The problem that we've got is just like the TERF's arguments are like really coherent and convincing. And like, I know they're evil and wrong, but they just sound really coherent and convincing, and our arguments sound shit.
Yeah.
But it also went on to say, so can people give me, I mean, I know, and that was the interesting thing, I know they're wrong and they're evil, but can you give me a sort of decent things to say in return?
Can somebody give me a cheat sheet? I know they're wrong, and I can't figure out why, but someone knows.
Right, why? And we're like, no, they can't give you a cheat sheet. Like,
no, there is no cheat sheet.
I've spent the best part of like the last fucking 5 years trying to work out the most, because I'm a philosopher, so I actually want to like argue with the strongest version.
Yes.
Your case, and I can't.
There isn't one.
It's like when I spoke to Helen about her book, and she was just like, in the end, I thought I was going to have to write all these refutations of their arguments, and they're just so piss poor that I just decided it wasn't even worth it.
That's just it. So our side, so to speak, is making all this effort to find the best arguments against us possible and engage with them, and there's just nothing. So they're not making any arguments to begin with. But then when our side makes the arguments, they don't try to rebut our arguments. They just ignore them altogether. So it's just totally lopsided,
Or they do what you were saying earlier.
They either ignore them or twist them to make us say something that we're not saying, like you're on the same side as the Taliban, or or like the one where they're always like, you're essentialist, you're biological determinist, and we're like, no, we're gender critical, right? So, and it's taken me a really long time to work out that the reason they think that is that they've already decided that the word woman is a gender word, right? So when we say women are female, and what we're saying, when we say women are female, the claim we're making is woman is a sex concept, not a gender concept. But they can't even hear that, even though we keep saying woman is a sex concept and we don't want it to be redefined as a gender concept, and that's what we're objecting to. When we say women are female, it's a projection thing. They interpret it like it's just pure they're like living in a hall of mirrors. They can only hear woman as a gender thing. So when we say women are female, what they hear is female people must do the woman gender.
Right. Yeah.
And then they go, that's biological essentialism. And we're like, no, it's not, because we don't think woman is a gender concept. That's the point. That's why we're saying women are female.
Oh, that's brilliant. I don't even think I was ever imagined that they saw it that way. This is kind of like
that's what's
moment.
That's what's going on, right? And it took me like 5 years, because every time I'd be like, women are female, and they'd be like, that's biological essentialism. And I'd be sitting there being like, what? How do you get to that?
Yeah.
Well, Jane, you said the best thing. I've used it many a time since, which is when someone said trans women are women, you said, how are male people female? And I thought that was such a great answer to it. I always use it. It's such a brilliant short,
Explain to me. But that's the thing that, and this actually happens in the feminist literature, right? At some point about 15 years ago, a chunk of academic feminism decided that woman was a gender word, and they split. They decided there was it's a crazy thing that to do with like a misunderstanding of the sex gender distinction. They were like, there is a sex gender distinction, and then they went, female is the sex word and woman is the gender word, and then they went, well, woman and sex have to be can't be connected to each other, because if they're connected to each other, that's biological determinism. Therefore, woman, the gender, has nothing to do with female people. And you're just like, how, what? And then so then they're like, so now women is just a random gender thing that's got nothing to do with female people, and female people don't really have a name anyway, and we've abolished women, and they didn't bother to actually tell, this was all going on. I wasn't even really paying any attention to this, and I was in the academy. I was like, I don't know what they're doing over there, but it's nonsense. And then this happens, and suddenly, but it's kind of hilarious. It's like when Sally Hines comes out and she's somehow outraged. She's like, but we abolished you 15 years ago. Like, yeah. And she's like, all the women actually in the world are like, you did fucking what?
Sorry, I just got to share this as well, by the way, before we hit like, you spiteful rocks. But yeah, I mean, there was something else I was going to say along those. I was going to ask you along those lines. I mean, about that recategorization. I've also noticed that they do a very weird thing. Like when I would respond with "How are males female?" Your line, they would say trans women are female, and it changed again, and it was like, oh, okay, so nothing means anything. I mean, that's removing the last like tethering to reality there is.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah. I mean, what's the thing they do? Well, I'm a woman, and women are female, and I'm biological. So that's what Rachel McKinnon did once.
So I'm a biological female.
So therefore, I'm a biological female.
But it's again, isn't it? It's coming up with the conclusion, and then just twisting everything in order to make it work.
Yeah. I mean, and
therefore we can say anything we like, just like that bloke. He was saying, I know they're evil and wrong, but tell me how. So they just want any sort of argument to.
Well, idea. I was talking to a friend who's writing a book on all this, and she said that for part of the book, she looked into the quote unquote science that underpins all their arguments, and she said, "There's nothing there. There's no science."
Of course, there isn't.
I mean, we know this, but it's still extraordinary to think about. It's still extraordinary. Let me give you this quickly, theory, Jane, because like I genuinely think that academics like Sally Hines and Alison Phillips, I think they know there's nothing underneath this, and they've been basically selling snake oil for 15 years. Alison Phillips' famous thing of Lego sculptures. She got her students to build Lego sculptures that Duplo sculptures that represented.
Lego was too advanced.
So that is someone who is treating young minds that are probably at their most open and the most receptive to knowledge as if they have special needs, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that is like the most infantilizing thing I can possibly imagine. The biggest waste of money in an education, and I think that you notice, like, remember you were talking about the academic who said that they've targeted my mother. I think she knows full well that women haven't targeted her mother. I think these people are engaged in a kind of a scorched earth strategy, I don't know, because I think there is something that's driving it, and what is driving it is the very, very deep and profound desire to deny and disavow the reality of being female. And
there's a profound emotionalism to all of it.
There's a very, I mean, like, I actually blocked Sally ultimately, and as we know, we went at it for quite a while. And the reason why I was particularly angry with her is because is really because I find it very, as someone who values thinking, I just find it fucking offensive that someone is taking public money and turning out this like absolutely willful fucking trash, and won't defend it. And when they're called on it and asked to defend it in public, I'm like, you're in receipt of like thousands of pounds, like hundreds of thousands of pounds of public money, and you cannot defend your ideas in public, and that's fucking immoral, right? And that really bothers me. So I went at it for a while with her, and in the end, at one point, I was kind of ribbing her about when the census report was used in the House of Lords in the reading of the MoMA bill, and she went on this tirade, which was actually very personal, kind of vitriolic tirade, and that wasn't what made me block her. What made me block her was the next day I went and looked at her timeline, and she had tweeted about every 15 minutes about me for about 5 hours. And in between the tweets that were personal attacks on me was her going, I am not traumatized. I will not allow you to make me traumatized. I refuse your politics of trauma. How dare you? I am not traumatized. And that really fucking got to me, actually, because and if you look at the academic literature, and it's a thread that runs all the way through this kind of strand of feminism, there is this just really, really deep, visceral, instinctive desire to disavow being female.
To kind of drop out of womanhood. Yeah,
and it's the same kind of impulse that we talk about in relationship to the female MBs, right? It's, you know, this part of academic feminism that was basically like, well, if we're female, then these horrible things are going to happen. So, and then there's these various different ideas come along that are just like, well, we'll just there won't be females anymore, and then they go, great. and you know, it's a kind of form of wish fulfillment, and when we refuse to allow them to take the escape route, I think what's actually happening is we're like pushing them back against something that they do not want to confront, and that's where a lot of the is coming.
Yes, absolutely.
Is coming from. So I don't know. I mean, I think there's also, I mean, don't get me wrong, there is also a good slice of cynical careerism, because you will get handsomely rewarded for fucking over women by the academy. And Sally has certainly done very well out of it, as has Judith Butler and a number of other people. Whereas if you go into the academy with like actually really committed politics that's really committed to women, you get a lot of resistance. So there's definitely that going on. But I also think there's if you look at that body of feminist literature, there's an awful lot of just body disavow and wanting to just disavow the situation of being a female in the current, you know, and then, you know, don't want to bring it back to Afghanistan, but like, you know, this shit's real. So, yeah.
Let's let me just someone asked what are MBs.
I have to wave this.
What, a cat?
I have to wave this at Artie.
All right.
What is that?
Something to do with Prince.
It's my Prince necklace.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Someone asked what are NBs? That's non-binary, right?
Non-binary.
Yeah, NBs are non-binary. There's. Let me ask another question. This is another aspect of the incel thing that I find interesting in terms of its connection with the trans rights movement. But I notice a lot of videos. I mean, you'll see them. There's a unfortunately named Twitter account called Libs of TikTok, and it's mostly these young men with long hair, and they are just persuading women that there's something bigoted about them not wanting to sleep with them,
right?
Because they're men. Now, this seems to me like possibly the major kind of aim of incel culture, you know, which is to kind of, you know, people who either think they're unfuckable or become unfuckable. And excuse me using that word, but it is the best description. And blaming women for it. Like these guys, what the way they're trying to meet women is probably the worst. They're aimed at lesbians.
No, exactly. I mean, this is the thing with the trans lesbians, with the incel thing. This is also, there was a little brouhaha about Benjamin Boyce as well, like a few days ago, because he did some tweet that was basically like, I tell you what, we'll, you know, if we can call you frigid, or if we stop calling you frigid, if you stop calling us creepy, right? And
Yes,
and I mean, he deleted it in the end because I think he got quite a lot of pushback. But it was like, this is exactly the, you don't understand the dynamic, right? And I've had this conversation with Benjamin, right, where I've tried to explain to him quite clearly, like, the creepiness is being entitled, right? Women do not actually, if someone hits, I've been hit on in ways that are not threatening and not creepy, right? It is possible to hit on women in ways that is not scary, right? You have to be able to treat them as human, and you have to not approach them with entitlement or any sense of coercion, and be quite fucking chill about it, right? But it can be done. So this, you know, but the whole structure of what he is saying, you know, like, you know, we need to be able to call you frigid, or we have some desire to be able to call it, and that's, you know, is exactly the thing that is causing the creepiness, right? Yes. It's like that's what you don't understand. The fact that you have some desire to want to punish women when they reject you is the reason why you are creepy, and the reason why women are rejecting you, because men who get cross when we don't do what they want are a threat to us, right? And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with the transbians. It's the same thing with Owen. It's the same thing with incel culture. It's like, women are their own people, and you need to be okay with them not serving you. And if you're gonna go into some kind of narcissistic fury, or be slightly incensed, or even slightly grumpy, we can't. The thing is, they also don't seem to be able to tell. Once a man exhibits the fact that he is not okay with dealing with a woman being like, no, sorry, right? We can't tell, like, how far that's going to go, right? Because that can go from someone being mildly grumpy to someone being extremely violent.
Yeah.
And like, once you've crossed that line, we don't know. Our little spidey senses just go up, and we immediately go, "You're a threat. Back and get the fuck away from me."
Yeah.
And he has no appreciation of that. He has no appreciation of what it's like for women to walk around in a world in which men come up to us in the street and are potentially threats to them if we don't pander to them, potentially threats to us if we don't pander to them.
I wondered if he got it by the end, because he did delete the tweet. I wonder if saying it was, you know, reading the pushback, maybe he
yeah. I think he's a bright guy. He's obviously going to take on board things that people say. It was probably
I had a long conversation with him about it a couple of years ago, and he did not take anything on board.
No.
Oh dear. Okay.
So and I even showed him, like, I showed him fucking Prince videos and was like, Benjamin, if you want to understand how to approach a woman in a sexual way without scaring her, this guy wrote a fucking handbook.
Yes, it's a style I use myself. But there was one other thing I was going to ask. I want to just go back a little bit to like when we were joking about when we were laughing about the people who were pitching on TikTok to lesbians, that I'm trying to gently persuade them that there's something wrong with their desire not to want to sleep with men. You know, I look at some of these people and they seem like, you know, somewhat dangerous people. But I look at others and I just think these guys have been groomed themselves to think that this will work, because these rote phrases like genital preferences and all this sort of stuff, you know, we've heard them a million times, and it all amounts to the same thing, which is, you know, sleep with me or you're a bigot. Wow. Now, the scary thing for me, and the sad thing for me, is I look at them in almost the same way I look at young women who cut off their breasts and so on, as having been told a huge lie. They've grown up with a huge lie, where they've been told that this is the way to do it. This is how to do this, how to meet women. This is how to kind of live a fulfilled life, is to go, you know, do little videos where you're talking about how women who don't want to touch penis are somehow, there's something bigoted, there's something corrupt about them, you know? And I I don't know. I wonder, sometimes I think about incels as people who are doing it for, aggressive or frightening reasons. But then there's also, I think, probably a lost generation of these young men who genuinely think they're not doing anything wrong. I mean, is that wrong? Is that like, am I giving them giving them too much credit?
Well, I mean, to the extent that the culture that we are in breeds a certain amount of entitlement, then yes, they have been conditioned. I mean, insofar as, males are brought up in that degree of entitlement, they have been conditioned. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is why we need to not bring up people to bring people up to not be so entitled, because
yes, but that entitlement has always been there. But this is a new kind of like an agreed upon entitlement.
It's a new particular twist on the entitlement, yeah. But it's coming from the same place. Right. I mean, if you look, it's coming from the same place insofar as when we talk about, where does trans activism come from, and like how a bunch of different things get attached to it. A bunch of different things get attached to it, but the place that it comes from, really, the driver of it is, the desire of late transitioning males to be validated as women. That's the drive. Yes. That's where the emotional energy
we saw it happen,
and the heart of it comes from.
Like, we saw it happen. We saw right at the beginning when I first joined this fight, should we say. It wasn't even really joining a fight. It was thinking, realizing that this was sort of happening, this conversation was happening. But there were hardly any trans men. They weren't a thing. Like, especially teenage girls, they just weren't there. It was late transitioning men. That was it. And there are some trans men who are involved behind the scenes, and there is some work that's done. I mean, in terms of where the ideology is laid down, it's actually a weird alliance between late transitioning trans males of the type who mostly want to remain intact, so i.e. the AGPs, and quite butch lesbians, some of whom then become trans men. But they're coming from quite different places, right? They both have a drive about wanting to erase the reality of sex, but it's coming from quite different places, right? For a lot of the butch lesbians, it's coming from, I think, histories of having been missexed, right? I feel quite a lot of sympathy for that, right? Like, Leslie Feinberg, for example, or someone like that who wrote some of the early texts, possibly the most like masculine looking woman I've ever seen in my life, and actually couldn't move through the world as a female because they just didn't pass as female. And so that's, it's a fairly unusual situation, but you can understand that would present certain kinds of challenges and would produce, therefore, a desire to be like this thing where people are separated into males and females because of the particular circumstances of that particular person. There is a drive there to get rid of that distinction. That makes sense to me, but it's that in combination with the drive of AGP males, basically. Those are very different drives in themselves. So even at the very beginning, it's not one phenomenon, and it's not coming from one place.
Well, also the AGP males are much more fundamentalist about their beliefs, I think. I think a lot of these butch lesbians who became trans men still had an affinity with the lesbian community, still had some still had some, they still were in solidarity with women a lot of the time. They were just coping with it in a very in a fragile kind of way, perhaps. Whereas these AGP males, it's a sexual compulsion to be much more fundamentalist about their transition,
Right. And if you look, I mean, if you think of someone like Anfalso Sterling or Butler as well, they actually fall in that category, I think, to some extent so what you have, what's going on with them is a certain kind of wounding for a certain kind of reason, but it doesn't have, again, this kind of really intense narcissistic entitled fury that you get from the AGP male, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the same thing. And actually, if you think about what's going on with an incel and what's going on with an AGP male, in both sense, when women say no, what is being denied is the fulfillment of a sexual drive, right? And that's what causes this very, very intense kind of narcissistic fury. And that's why one of the reasons why this whole conflict is so triggering and distressing to women, because it feels fucking rapey, right? Because it's the same energy. It's you are standing in the way of the fulfillment of my desire, and I must annihilate you. And
absolutely, it is.
That's very well put.
And then we're like, and then people are like, why is this so toxic? And I'm like, I don't know. You unleashed an entire political movement that's fueled by really intense rapey energy, and you're wondering why this got really toxic.
Yeah. And but there's so many insidious ideas that come out of it, like we were saying, young women thinking they can drop out of womanhood by calling themselves non-binary or trans men, young men thinking they're entitled to sex with lesbians if they have any kind of dysphoria or identify as self-identify as lesbians, and all of this stuff because there's no pushback in the media. It's verboten to have any discussion about this. It's so important that we do, because of all of these insidious ideas that are coming up. We're exacerbating male entitlement. We're exacerbating female anxiety about womanhood. We're just making everything terrible for so many people.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think as feminist women, we have a lot of, some trans man did a thread the other day and was basically like, you have this very patronizing idea about teenage girls and you just think they're stupid and you're denying them agency and blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, no, look, we just remember how fucking distressing being a teenage girl was, right? And
I think it was a trans man who said it. It was a female
it was a trans man.
Yeah, it was a trans man.
It was a trans man, which I mean, like, the level of dissociation is very distressing to me, right? That you can't, like I said, come back to the thing with Sally Hines. There's just this very deep need to disavow, and I understand why, because it's fucking traumatic, right? Being female in this culture can be extremely traumatic, particularly when you go through puberty, and it takes quite a long time. I think most women would say it takes about like 15 or 20 years to get over going through puberty as a female person in this culture, because you suddenly lose all your humanity and you suddenly realize that you're a piece of meat, and men feel entitled to like pour you and push you up against walls and shout abuse at you out of car windows. And you kind of go through, I went through like a brief period where I was like, oh, this sex thing, this is all a bit exciting. Oh my God, no, it's terrifying. I got about 5 minutes of it being fun before it became really fucking scary.
It's happening to my daughter now. She comes back a lot of the time saying, some bloke shouted out his car window, this and me, they slowed down, or some bloke actually touched me on the back and said, oh, you're gorgeous, will you go out with me, and I just feel for her so much.
No, it's horrible, and it's very, it's like, that's why I think it's like you've got these AGP men just being like, well, our desire must be fulfilled. I mean, it's like, have you got any idea what it's like being a fucking woman?
Yeah.
Because we live up in a world where the whole sexual landscape is like a fucking terrifying minefield. And, young girls now are barely having any sex at all because the boys are all raised on hardcore pornography and, think that like non-consensually slapping people is like how you turn them on. So,
well, that's a note. That's not the nicest note to go out on, but we're
this
running.
Is what always happens.
You're right. I mean, I realized quite late that if a girl smiles at someone, it's dangerous for them.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. I thought, and suddenly, and as soon as you hear it explained once, you're like, oh yeah, of course.
You know, and then you have blokes being like, give us a smile, love, and you're like, no.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get punished for that. It's an extraordinary. It's a real.
Oh, and then you're also just like, it's actually. I mean, this is the thing I was trying to say with Benjamin and with the incels. Like, you're actually making it much harder for women to form sexual relationships with you, because as soon as you create this environment where it's actually threatening and dangerous, and we don't have any space to work out whether we might be interested in you or not, because it's coming with all of this, you know, fucking coercive, you know, entitled energy, then we're just going to put up the fucking drawbridge and be like, keep away from us.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, sometimes I wonder whether we can appeal to the men of the world by being like, you're making it really hard for us to fuck you. Like,
I have to say, in my 20s, that would have worked on me.
Quite a lot of us would actually quite like for it to be easier for us to fuck you, but you're making this really difficult. So we're trying to explain how this could go better, and like try not to be such an entitled dick.
Well, I think that's a much better. I think that's a much better place to leave
it. Absolutely.
Well, listen, Jane, it's as always an absolute pleasure to listen to you talk.
Always.
You know, and come on again. Hey, maybe you can come on every time a Radical Notion comes out. That would be a good spacing, wouldn't it?
I need to come back and have this thing out with Artie at some point about whether Prince was AGP.
And you two can do it with some wine.
That's a brilliant debate to have. It's such an interesting debate. Didn't you have to, if I was your girlfriend and stuff like that?
Right.
But,
so Artie said this. Artie said this while I was away, and I got like a bunch. I came back on, and Lorelei was on Twitter being like, "I think they waited until Jane was on Twitter break to start saying that Prince was AGP," and then we were like, "Oh my god, don't tell Jane! There's going to be like a massive fireball." And then I kind of turned up and was like, "What is going on?" About 5 people at that point were like, "Yes, we knew about this, but we decided not to tell you because we thought you were during your holiday." So I was just like, Artie, I need to have a word.
Yeah. You should. I tell you what, you need to do it with some wine, and I am staying clear.
I tell you what,
I was going to be very nice about it. I think it actually raises some interesting questions.
I think it's an exercise of just looking at what AGP is, not just in its most negative expression, but in the ways that it's sort of so common. It could be as many as 5% of males.
It was non-possessive. It was non-entitled. It was completely devoted to the woman's pleasure. You know, it's a very, very interesting.
It's not AG. That's not AG.
Interesting discussions to be had.
Being completely devoted to a woman's pleasure is not AG.
No, but ladies, it's my approach. So remember that.
Right.
Like Prince. Remember Prince. Prince and me. Just think of me in the same. Whenever you think of Prince, think of me.
Okay, Graham. I think that's going to have an impact on my interior life that I don't like.
Yeah. No, you're excused, Jane. You're excused.
Thank you.
Everyone else needs to think of me as Prince.
All right.
Thank you very much, everyone. Absolutely wonderful. That was a great show. Really great to talk to you. See you soon. And to all our commenters, thank you for joining us. We'll see you
thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.